Right, well, hello everybody. The last lecture, and this is the last talk of 12 that you've had this week. Do you realise you've had 12 lectures altogether? You have, and actually chose to be the last one here. Probably because this is going to be the least profound of all the talks that you've had. And you've heard it all before, because, you know, the theme, reality, illusion and life. So lots of the things I had in my talk has already been said before, but I suppose there's no harm in repeating things. So, the title of this week's school, as you know, Reality, Illusion and Life. And I will start with a quote from an old Hermetic script. And as far as I can recall, this hasn't been said before, but somebody might put me right on that. This is what it says. Reality is what endures. To find it, man must penetrate the depths of his own being and find that which has always been. The deeper self that has never not been, nor can never cease to be. The true self can only be discovered when we let go of the ever-changing personality. When we cease to rely on the physical phenomena which never lasts, and when we stop thinking of a personal God to be worshipped. That sums up the week in a few sentences. Nevertheless, I do have more to say. So according to one of the doctrines propounded in the non-dual yoga philosophy, there are actually 3 grades of reality. Now the first one I've just talked about. The first is the real world of the spirit, transcendent and absolute. The second one is the everyday world which we inhabit, a world of Maya or illusion, but real enough to us as we go about our daily lives. And the last grade of reality within that empirical world is the still less world of dream and fantasy, in which the mind weaves an insubstantial pageant of fleeting images. Now that last one I'm not going to be talking about. We can imagine that, can't we? So what about illusion, that which we call Maya? How can we explain it? It has been described as an invisible veil hiding true reality from our eyes. But as we don't see this veil, it is very hard for us to comprehend the actual meaning of Maya. One of the Upanishads says Maya is a realm of ever-changing appearances conditioned by name, form and action. However, this same illusory world is seen by us as real enough, and for some it is all that there is, for they have no concept of a soul or a deeper or spiritual meaning to life. What they experience through their 5 senses is reality to them. How can it be otherwise? And they probably deny the existence of a divinity by whatever name it can be called. Now, I expect that, as I have, you have met people who have no concept of an inner life or of an existence following the demise of their physical bodies. Some may be your friends or even your relatives. And I wonder, have you ever tried to persuade them otherwise? A long while ago, I had just such a friend. We shared interests, here we go, such as classical music, Scottish country dancing, solving cryptic crossword puzzles, a bit like Cynthia, and rambling in the countryside. However, we differed in our views of things of a spiritual nature. My friend believed that death was the end of everything, and that the one life we had to be experienced to the full, not in a selfish way or a way at the expense of others, but nevertheless to be enjoyed. My friend was an atheist, so that it was useless to promote God or divinity to him. And as for Theosophy, well, I'm sad to say that was even more incomprehensible, and so was dismissed. Now, there are several ways we could attempt to open the eyes of an unbeliever to the true reality. Perhaps the first way to try is to look at the natural world. One of the supposed three attributes of the divine is beauty, and the other two, as I'm sure you are aware, are truth and goodness, sometimes also called kindness. The beauty of our world is at times breathtaking, and many see the hand of the divine behind the beauty. Some landscapes, such as deserts, bare mountains and treeless tundra, seem stark or bleak, but even they have a natural charm. And it's my opinion that it's only when mankind interferes with the landscape for his own benefit that ugliness can be present. And I'm thinking particularly of open-cast mining, quarrying, taking down forests so that they can plant palm trees. But on the other hand, you can think about it, some people do beautify the natural landscape. Think of Capability Brown and all his parks that he's done, and the gardens. So we do have a plus to us, but it's when man is greedy, I think, that he spoils the earth for us. So I have a story to tell you. One day, my friend and I were walking in the Surrey countryside, near Box Hill on the North Downs. Some of you are nodding, yes, so you know Box Hill. It's not far away from me, and it's one of the favourite places to go to. It was a pleasant summer's day, and we were actually following a footpath through the woods, diagonally down the side of the valley, and halfway down the wood finished, and then it opened up to this lovely grassy valley on the other side. So we walked down through the trees. At the end of the footpath was a stile. We climbed the stile, and as we stepped, and we looked up, and as we stepped out of the shadow of the trees into the valley, we looked up, and the air was sparkling. It was alive. It was fun. It was wonderful. And it wasn't just the sunshine, it was more than sunshine. It was a really lovely experience. It didn't last very long, sadly, and to me it was a sure sign of a spiritual element to our world. But my friend sadly didn't see it like that. I spoke to Eric about this before he went home, and he nodded. He said, "Oh yes, the sort of you're opening up to the astral plane." And because my first thoughts was, when I looked at it, I thought the elements or the fairies had come out to play. But as soon as they saw a human into their territory, they disappeared like that. So if we cannot persuade non-believers with the beauty of nature, we could use music and art. For although these are man's conceptions, their inspirations are often spiritually revealed. And I've named a few composers who to me are produce some really spiritual music. Bach, Bruckner, Beethoven, Mozart, Wagner, the modern day John Tavener, Arvo Pärt, and others, and I'm sure you have your own favourites. And I think they were inspired by a deeper reality from within them. Likewise, some of the works of poets, artists and sculptors can be appreciated as divinely inspired. And I think there's probably a whole talk that could be based on that. An article in a recent issue of the Theosophist called The Yoga of Beauty, written by Bernardino del Bocca, B-O-C-A. He was a prominent Italian Theosophist, and he died in 2001. And this article states that the secret of yoga of beauty lies solely in knowing that a spiritual reality that can be seen by everyone exists everywhere. Now, you might not agree with this statement. He says that Easterners are better at understanding the beauty of art than Westerners, because Easterners see art as a way to enlightenment. I'm not sure whether I totally agree with that statement, but this is what he said. And then Chinese call beauty the Tao, which is the meaning away. To me, there are no words more poignant that equate beauty with the divine than those written by the Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran, who wrote in his book, The Prophet, about beauty. And I am going to quote you the whole chapter. I make no apologies for doing that, because you can't just do bits of it. It's read as a whole, and itself, I think, is extremely beautiful. How many of you know The Prophet? Well, most of you. I did ask Barry to see if he could bring a copy, but I don't think he's had a copy for sale. If you don't know it, it really is worth getting a copy of it to read. So, here we go. And a poet said, "Speak to us of beauty." And he replied, "Where shall you seek beauty, and how shall you find her, unless she herself be your way and your guide? And how shall you speak of her, except she be the weaver of your speech?" The aggrieved and the injured say, "Beauty is kind and gentle, like a young mother, half shy of her own glory as she walks among us." And the passionate say, "Nay, beauty is a thing of might and dread. Like the tempest, she shakes the earth beneath and the sky above us." The tired and weary say, "Beauty is of soft whisperings. She speaks in our spirit. Her voice yields to our silences like a faint light that quivers in fear of the shadow." But the restless say, "We have heard her shouting among the mountains, and with her cries came the sound of hooves and the beating of wings and the roar of lions." At night the watchmen of the city say, "Beauty shall arise with the dawn from the east." And at noontide the toilers and the wayfarers say, "We have seen her leaning over the earth from the windows of the sunset." It's beautiful words. In winter the snowbound say, "She will come with the spring, leaping upon the hills." And in the summer heat the reapers say, "We have seen her dancing with the autumn leaves, and we saw a drift of snow in her hair." All these things have you said of beauty, yet in truth you spoke not of her, but of needs unsatisfied. And beauty is not a need, but an ecstasy. It is not a mouth thirsting, nor an empty hand stretched forth, but rather a heart enflamed and a soul enchanted. It is not the image you would see, nor the song you would hear, but rather an image you see through your closed eyes and a song you hear through your shut ears. It is not the sap within the furrowed bark, nor a wing attached to a claw, but rather a garden forever in bloom, and a flock of angels forever in flight. People of Orphalese, beauty is life when life unveils her holy face. But you are life, and you are the veil. Beauty is eternity, gazing at itself in a mirror. But you are eternity, and you are the mirror. Isn't that beautiful? I had to say the whole thing. I couldn't just say bits of it. I'm just going to digress for a little bit. This week we've had some lovely music. Even Damon's been playing Beethoven. Perhaps I'm having a little bit of influence on him, you never know. So Damon's played some nice music, Mike's played some nice music, you had some music from me last night. So my interest, as you probably gather, is classical music, and music can be so different. It can be loud and brash, it can be quiet and introspective, it can be rhythmical, you can want to get up and dance to it. Every mood can be covered by music of some kind or another. So on Wednesday, Mike played us some clips. Is he here? Yes, there you are, sorry. Right. Which was much appreciated. And you left the best to last, didn't you? As you said. You left the Jacqueline Dupre playing the last part of the last movement of Dvorak's cello concerto. And I can well remember hearing that for the very first time, some time ago now. It was on the radio, and I can't remember who the cellist was, but it's quite likely it was Jacqueline Dupre, because I was enchanted. I couldn't move. And Mike will probably agree with this. That piece of music, it's you get a crescendo, and you think it's coming to the end, and then suddenly it goes down, and then it works up again to another crescendo, and this does about 3-4 times until you actually get to the final movement, the final note, which sort of just fades away into the ether, really. And Mike said that Jacqueline, in his opinion, wasn't playing the music, she was the music. Am I right? That's what you said. So, if you don't mind my indulgence, I will tell you a story when I had a similar experience. Some of you may have heard this, but probably most of you haven't. This must be a good 30 years ago or more. And I went to a concert in the Wigmore Hall, which is just down the road from headquarters in London. Some of you probably know it. It's quite a small venue, tremendously good acoustics, and the concert that I went to here included Beethoven's sonata called the Appassionata Sonata. And now I would like to refer to what Cynthia said this morning about the Bindu, right? Bindu just means a point, and it's represented by like a crescent moon, and it's this point here. And if you're doing Nada yoga, the yoga of sound, you're actually supposed to concentrate on that point. And I think at that time, I probably was doing a course on Kriya Yoga. But I have difficulty concentrating there, but here, no trouble. Third eye. And particularly if you actually just lick your finger and put a little bit of saliva there, it really focuses your attention. So the pianist, who was French, but I can't remember his actual name, started to play. So I decided, instead of listening with my ears, I would listen here, through here. So I closed my eyes and settled down, and the music played. Now, I was hearing the music with my ears, but I was listening to it here. There's a subtle difference, at least I think there was. And it didn't take long before I was somewhere else. Tears were streaming down my face, and I was somewhere up there, and I thought, I am that music. I was that piece of music. Beautiful experience. I've never had it again. I probably never will have something like that again. But what Mike said the other day, Wednesday, about being the music, not playing the music, reminded me, and I thought perhaps I would tell you this little story about my experience. And this, I've just told you that because I'm going to take you back to a sentence that I've just read out of the prophet. It is not the image you would see through... Sorry, start again. It is not the image you would see, nor the song you would hear, but rather an image you see through your closed eyes and a song you hear through your shut ears. And that's what I was doing, wasn't it? So that resonated with me as well. Moving on. Although we can appreciate the characteristics of beauty, such as harmony, rhythm, symmetry, and proportion with our senses, the divine within that beauty is experienced from the heart and not through the mind. And for this to happen, we must be at peace within ourselves. We must have harmony, and as it says in the voice of the silence, before the soul can see, the harmony within must be attained. So we have to transcend the senses, the mind, and the emotions, and try to develop an appreciation of beauty as the part of reality that continuously exists in the living moment of all things. In the June 1957 edition of the Theosophist, there was an article which was called The Door to Beauty, written by C. Dasa, in which he says that beauty is an aspect of reality. So it should be sought out in life everywhere, and that we should surround ourselves with beautiful things and follow the example set by the ancient Greeks, who used beauty for their religion, their culture, and their moral and social values. The philosopher Plato proposed 3 concepts that would be assumed in future as the greatest values of humanity. Just a moment ago, I said these were aspects of the divine. Here, Plato is using them as values of humanity: truth, beauty, and he says kindness, not goodness. And he took the definition of beauty to the metaphysical level, making it a spiritual beauty. Plato's concept of beauty includes both physical and spiritual beauty and identifies it with kindness or goodness and truth. Later, Plotinus affirms, as Plato did, that beauty is in life, not only in its forms, but also in something that hides behind forms and is identified as soul. Beauty is not in forms, but in its radiance. I'm going to say that again because I think it's really lovely. Beauty is not in forms, but in its radiance. All forms have a light of truth, beauty, and goodness about them if we could see it. For us to get a glimpse of what lies behind the veil of illusion, we are told that our intellectual abilities can only take us so far. For reality lies beyond the mind and beyond normal levels of consciousness. And sometimes the divine spark is described as a golden egg as small as a mustard seed lying within us all and transcending the physical, the mental and emotional aspects of our being. This little mustard seed comes into yoga practice quite often. It's used as a meditation, the mustard seed, the tiny seed within. Two more short quotes from the article on the yoga of beauty. One says this: "It is right to accept all forms of artistic expression that stem from genuine efforts to understand something that lies beyond the bounds of sensory illusion." And the other quote is this: "Beauty is the expression of the energy that responds to the dreams, desires, and faith of those who hurl themselves beyond the limits of material illusion." I like the idea of hurling yourself beyond the limits of material illusion. Have to be quite active to do that. So what other ways can we use, perhaps, to persuade a non-believer of the true reality? We can, of course, explore the true meaning of religions. For if we strip away the creeds and the dogmas and the priestly hierarchies, we come to see that religion is a recognition and observance of the basic laws of the universe, which are also inherent in mankind. The most essential truth of all religions is that man is a divine spirit incarnate in a body. This reminds me of Eric's talk the other day when he asked people, put your hands up if you have a spirit. So many hands went up. Trick question. You don't have a spirit, you are a spirit. Going back to the Hermetic script again, it says this: "If then thou dost not make thyself like unto God, thou cannot know him. For like is knowable to like alone. Make then thyself to grow to the same stature as the greatness which transcends all measures. Leap forth from everybody, transcend all time, become eternity, and thus you shalt know God." So as well as hurling ourselves, we've got to leap as well. Leap forth from everybody, transcend all time, become eternity, and thus you shalt know God. As we know only too well, religions have divided mankind with tragic consequences throughout millennia and up to the present time, with the religious extremism seemingly unstoppable. in the name of religion, so many people throughout the world have been displaced from their homelands, persecuted, tortured, and sadly even killed. We all know that when religions are examined in depth, their essence is the same, albeit expressed in different ways. They have one source and give the same message as Theosophy, the unity of humankind. That's why we study Theosophy. And so, for a non-believer, we could give them a book on Theosophy to read. Would be a worthwhile exercise for them. Whether they would believe what they were reading is another matter, of course, but you have to start somewhere, don't you? So let us explore what Helena Blavatsky had to say on reality and illusion. And this is from the collected writings 12, 6 to 5. This is what we read. Real life is in the spiritual consciousness of that life, in a conscious existence in spirituality, not matter. And real deaths are the limited perception of life, the impossibility of sensing conscious or even individual existence outside of form, or at least of some form of matter. Those who sincerely reject the possibility of conscious life, divorced from substance and a brain, are dead units. Now that is such a typical HPB statement. She doesn't fluff about, does she? She says it as it is, and she says, you sincerely reject the possibility of conscious life, divorced from substance and a brain, are dead units. And she goes on to quote the words of Paul, who was an initiate. And this is what Paul said, "Ye are dead, and your life is hidden with Christ in God." And HBB explains this in her way as, "Ye are personally dead matter, unconscious of its own spiritual essence, and your real life is hidden with your divine ego," when she puts in brackets Christos, "in or merged with God," and in brackets Atman. Speaking on esoteric lines, this is a good sentence, this one. Speaking on esoteric lines, every irrevocable materialistic person is a dead man, written in capital letters, a living automaton in spite of his being endowed with great brain power. So isn't that really typical HPB? At least I think it is anyhow. So basically she's saying that if you can't see that you have another level of consciousness and you're just using your brain and you only see consciousness materialistically, then you are a dead man or woman. Also, from the collected writings, HPB draws our attention to the 9th verse of the first chapter of the Gospel of John. This, I'm sure you know very well. The light was the true, and she's written in brackets, real, light, which illuminates every man, and she put in brackets, human being, coming into the world. The light was the true, real light which illuminates every man, human being, coming into the world. This light is the one reality, and therefore can be considered to be the divine essence within us all. Now, I'm digressing slightly here because you can see from this I've been reading The Theosophist, okay? And here is something which may be of use to somebody who is a non-believer in reality. And this is an article in the Theosophist written by a rabbi. And that quite surprised me, actually, to have an article in Theosophist written by a rabbi. Rabbi Rami Shapiro. And he was writing on his views on the meaning of God. Now, this came as quite new to me, but I expect to most of you it's not new at all. And now I've only been studying Theosophy for I don't know how many years, but when you come across something that you haven't realised before, it sort of makes its mark, doesn't it? In the English language, this is what he's saying, in the English language, the word God is a noun, whereas in the Hebrew language, God is a verb. Now, Pam, I'm sure you are very well aware of this. Anybody else know this as a fact? No? No. So when I thought of this, how can it be a verb? And I was trying to think of a verb which would describe it. So something it's actually quite difficult for us to grasp, because after, for centuries we've been taught that man is made in the image of God, and to think of God as our Father in heaven. Referring again to the Hebrew language, the rabbi tells us that the word Lord, found in the English Bible, is a terrible euphemism for the Hebrew verb, and Pam, you're going to have to help me out here, YHVH, how do you say it? Yahweh. Say it again? Yahweh. Thank you. I knew I wouldn't get it right if I tried. So this is a terrible euphemism for the Hebrew verb Yahweh, a future imperfect form of the verb to be. So this word Lord that we use could be thought of as the ising, and this is is-ing, of reality, that birthless, deathless and ceaseless waving ocean in which all waves, in other words all existence, rise and return. And I was thinking about this and thinking that perhaps another way of expressing this is to use the term ever becoming. Those of you who remember Geoffrey Farthing, it was one of his favourite expressions, wasn't it? Ever becoming. And to me this phrase signifies that we're on a journey. We're treading a path. And our goal is to return eventually to the source. We will now look to the East for some guidance on what we understand as the meanings of reality and illusion. We have the beautiful sacred writings such as the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, and others as well. And these books have, I put down here quite a bit, but I probably should say a lot to say. And there's one, I think it's the longest of the Upanishads, the Brihad Aranyaka. And in this we find this well-known prayer, and this must be the third time you've heard it this week, maybe more. Do you know it? Lead me from the unreal to the real. Lead me from darkness to light. Lead me from death to immortality. So at least two other speakers have quoted that, maybe more. So I'm sorry, you've heard it from me again. So what is this writer thinking about? So you can think that there are three aspects of existence. Well, there'll be six aspects, won't there? 3 and 3. Darkness, death and unreality. and their opposite, light, immortality, and reality. So reality is therefore seen to be the same as light and immortality, and Maya, or illusion, equates with darkness, death, and unreality. So in these Eastern scriptures, we have this description of Maya, illusion. It is the cosmic power which renders phenomenal existence and the perceptions thereof possible. In Hindu philosophy, that alone which is changeless and eternal is called reality. All that is subject to change through decay and differentiation, and which has therefore a beginning and an end, is regarded as Maya and illusion. That's a paragraph which could easily be expanded upon and used as a study. That which is subject to change through decay, differentiation, and which has therefore a beginning and an end, is regarded as Maya, illusion. The whole purpose of the Upanishadic teachings is to inform us that there is a deeper side to life, one which we can enter and which will lead to enlightenment and transcend the cycle of birth and death. It establishes the reality and supreme importance of self as the ultimate revealer and support of all we experience. The Upanishads fuse philosophy and spirituality in a way that we can understand, but it does require study, in-depth study. So by studying the Upanishadic writings, we are guided to the realization that our innermost self is the self of all. It is Brahman. What is the nature of Brahman, and how can our self be one with it? We cannot be one with Brahman if we conceive it as the creator of the universe, and thereby foster the belief that we ourselves can produce wonders of this kind. The Upanishads stress that the truest understanding of Brahman, or the Absolute, is that it transcends all such roles, such as world creator. Ultimately, reality in the Upanishads goes beyond all limitations, and it is realized as our own true self. Our own true nature transcends individuality and abides eternally in the light and bliss of the realization, myself is the self of all. Very simple sentence which could be a mantra for you. Myself, with a capital S, is the self of all. This is easy to say, but why do we find it so hard to understand? It is ignorance that allows the veil of Maya to hide reality. And there was a commentary on the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, and it put it this way. Even before realization, one has always been Brahman, but through ignorance, one considered oneself different from it. One has always been all, but through ignorance, one considered oneself otherwise. Therefore, banish this ignorance through the knowledge of Brahman, the knower of Brahman. Having all the while been Brahman, became Brahman, and having throughout been all, became all. But to be practical, how do we do this? How can we achieve this? We can use our minds and our intellect, but only to a certain degree. Another verse says this: the great and eternal self seems to be identified with the mind, the intellect, and the senses. The great and eternal self is hidden deep in our being, in what is called the space within the heart. The great and eternal self is the controller of everything, the lord of everything, the ruler of everything. Knowing it alone, one becomes a sage. In other words, gains wisdom. We can practice, with practice, we can train ourselves to be keenly aware of our mind and of our own thinking process. Now, here is a statement with which you might disagree. I shall be interested to have your comments afterwards. Right, I'll say that again. We can, with practice, train ourselves to be keenly aware of our mind and of our own thinking process. But what we cannot do is to be aware of awareness itself. This awareness can never pass into the container of the mind and be seen amongst its contents. This unchanging awareness, otherwise called consciousness, is our true self. And we find in these teachings a hierarchy of ideas that indicate the nature of Brahman. These ideas we can use in our meditations and our reflections. The apex of this hierarchy is pure abstraction, the denial of all finite qualities and attributes to the supreme reality. So these attributes of beauty, truth and goodness don't really exist in the supreme abstraction. They can't. But we are told this reality is not this, neti, N-E-T-I, neti, not this, not this. So if it's not this, what is it? It cannot be described. It is without the qualities we normally associate with our sense experiences, such as sight, sound, taste, colour, and touch. So, to help our thinking and reflections, we can use the following statements. Brahman is consciousness which transcends the mind and is infinite. Second statement, Brahman is pure being, one only, without the second. Brahman is bliss, complete and utter happiness without a trace of limitations or suffering. So in the traditional Vedantic philosophy, to contemplate the Absolute by affirming its identity as existence, consciousness and bliss, Sat, Chit, Ananda. These are fine words indeed, but they are only words. Words we can read in books, words we can hear in talks such as this, words we can share in conversations with others. Are they enough to persuade a sceptical non-believer of the true reality of the world? That mankind has a spiritual dimension, that consciousness continues after the death of the physical body, and will once again return to this earthly existence, and that which never changes is reality, is eternal. And there are some attributes that the aspirant should acquire as they start on a genuine search for their true self. And we've had this one before this week too, I think from Gary, at least. Firstly, they have to use discrimination, viveka, to enable them to separate the temporary from the eternal, the unreal from the real, the false from the true, and the earthly from the heavenly. And when we can do that, which might take quite a while, there comes something which I've called dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction with that which is not eternal, but is the objects of desires. And these desires are very hard to relinquish. We love them, don't we? We want them all the time. But we have to learn to be dissatisfied with them, because they're not fulfilling. They don't answer our spiritual needs. They might help us in this life, but they won't help us in the next life. And as well as acquiring discrimination and dissatisfaction, the aspirant is advised to gain control of his thoughts, which will then lead to control of words and actions. Everything we say or do comes from the thoughts that we have. Occasionally we are inspired and something just like turning a light on inside and it just happens, but mostly we have to think before we speak, we have to think before we do. So, and what else does the aspirant really need? As they tread the path to self-realization, which is really very long and hard, so endurance, patience and tolerance are necessities, essential for the progress along the path. The first practical step in self-help is meditation, and eventually, after long, sincere practice, the higher faculties of the mind are brought into action to influence and guide the ordinary thinking process. As thoughts are seen objectively, the meditator comes to appreciate that their true being is not identified with the thoughts, but with the principle of awareness to which the thoughts appear. This faculty that emerges and gives insight into the thinking process is known as buddhi, which is in its higher phase endows the meditator with intuitive knowledge of the reality behind the appearance, behind the veil of illusion, which is lifted, maybe briefly, just for a second. In its initial stages, buddhi makes possible and habitual the wise use of our intellect and will. Intellect and will are never absent from the inner life and are the essence of all experience. The meditator will come to see that their inner being consists not only of thought, but of a controller of thought, as well as that which transcends both thought and its controller. The higher source is the ultimate reality itself, also known as the inner ruler, our own true self. The meditator comes to the final realization of truth, that thou art, meaning that in our true nature we are none other than the absolute, the supreme, non-dual, universal reality. In this talk, I've nearly finished. Got time. In this talk, we looked at ways where we could try to open the eyes or try to persuade a non-believer that the true meaning of reality, that which they see as being real, is only an illusion. We thought about beauty. We considered the essence of all religions, which we call Theosophy, and we looked at some sacred Vedic scriptures too. Some or all of these may or may not be appropriate, But before we try to persuade other people to our ways, to our ideas, and our ideals of the spiritual life, we must know it within ourselves. We must show it by our thoughts, our words, and actions. And that a pilgrim treading the spiritual path does so with joy in their heart, peace in their mind, and a love for all beings. So, a couple more sentences and then I've finished. Sorry, Damon. So, just think about these 3 sentences. The existence in me, my very being, my isness, is not separate from the being of the whole universe. Sat. The consciousness in me is one with consciousness everywhere. Chit. The happiness in me, the bliss, whether revealed or potential, is not separate from the bliss experience anywhere. Ananda.